Marcus Vale's breath misted inside his salvage helmet as he drifted through the abandoned Helix research station. The massive structure rotated slowly in the void, its solar panels dark for over 2 centuries. The ship, the Wanderer's Edge, hung nearby, like a patient predator waiting for valuable prey. "Control, this is Vale. Beginning deep scan of Sector 7, he spoke into his comm unit. Static answered him. The station's thick hull blocked most transmissions. Leaving him alone in the metallic silence, Marcus had been salvaging derelict stations for 15 years. Ever since the mining wars left him without a home planet, most salvagers worked in teams, but Marcus preferred solitude. Teams meant splitting profits. Profits meant survival in the Outer Rim territories. His scanner picked up an energy signature 3 levels down. It's impossible after all this time. But the readings were steady. Emergency power, maybe. Or a backup generator that had somehow survived the centuries. Either way, it meant valuable tech. The corridor he entered showed signs of hasty evacuation. Personal belongings scattered on the floor, doors left open, meals half finished in the crew quarters. Whatever had happened here, it had happened fast. Marcus's research before arriving had shown the station going dark during some kind of experiment. The official reports were heavily classified, which usually meant military involvement. He descended through maintenance shafts and emergency passages, following his scanner toward the energy source. The architecture changed as he went deeper. The upper levels had been standard research facilities. Down here, the walls were thicker, reinforced with materials he didn't recognize. This wasn't just a research station. It was a containment facility. The energy signature led him to a sealed laboratory behind multiple security doors. His salvage codes, updated regularly through black market channels, managed to override the ancient locks. The doors hissed open, revealing a chamber that took his breath away. At the center stood a translucent pod filled with shimmering liquid. Inside floated a woman, perfectly preserved, her long dark hair drifting around a face of impossible beauty. Chains of some crystalline material held her suspended, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Marcus circled the pod, his trained eye cataloging the valuable technology. The stasis system alone was worth a fortune. Far beyond anything he'd seen in current markets, something about the scene troubled him. This wasn't medical stasis. It's the chains, the isolated chamber, the military-grade security. This was a prison. His scanner beeped urgently. The pod systems were failing after centuries of operation. Power levels dropping, containment field destabilizing. Whatever was keeping the woman preserved was breaking down. Marcus hesitated. Standard. Salvage protocol was simple. Strip the valuable tech, leave everything else. The woman wasn't his problem. She'd been here for centuries. She was probably dead anyway. But as he watched, her eyelids fluttered slightly, and he realized she was still alive. The ethical implications crashed over him. He could take the technology and leave her to die as the systems failed. Or he could try to save her and possibly lose the most valuable salvage of his career. The choice should have been easy for a man who lived by profit margins and survival instincts. Instead, he found himself studying the pod's control systems. The stasis field could be safely deactivated, but doing so would wake her. And something in the classified fragments he'd read suggested that might be extremely dangerous. The woman's eyes opened suddenly, startling him. Deep violet irises focused on his face with startling intensity. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear through the fluid. But her expression was clear. She was asking for help. Marcus made his decision. He activated the emergency release. The sequence in the pod began to drain. The woman's chains dissolved as the fluid receded, leaving her free but unconscious on the pod's platform. As the last of the liquid drained away, she took her first breath in over 200 years. "Can you hear me?" Marcus asked, removing his helmet in the chamber's surprisingly fresh air. "You're safe now." Her eyes opened again, and this time they blazed with an inner light that seemed to pierce straight through him. When she spoke, her voice was like music mixed with thunder. "You fool," she whispered. "You have no idea what you've done." As she sat up, Marcus felt a burning sensation spread across his chest. Looking down, he saw glowing symbols appearing on his skin, identical to those that had been on her chains. The marks pulsed with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. "What's happening to me?" he demanded, trying to rub away the symbols. They only glowed brighter. The woman stood gracefully, her movement fluid despite centuries of immobility. She was tall, elegant, with an otherworldly beauty that made Marcus's breath catch. But her eyes held depths of knowledge and pain that spoke of unimaginable experiences. "You freed me," she said, stepping closer. "But freedom comes with a price. My name is Vera Ashton, and I was imprisoned here for creating something the galaxy feared to lose and feared to possess." "I'm Marcus Vale," he replied automatically, then winced as the symbols on his chest flared with heat. "What are these marks?" Vera said simply. "You touched my prison and chose to free me. Our fates are linked. I live because you chose compassion over profit. And you, ... Double quotes. She paused, studying his face. "You can only die when I do." Before Marcus could process this information fully, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights activated, and a computerized voice echoed through the chamber. "Containment breach detected. Security protocols activated. All unauthorized personnel must evacuate immediately." Vera's expression didn't change. "The station remembers its purpose. We need to leave now, Marcus Vale. Both our lives depend on it." As if to emphasize her words, the sounds of mechanical movement echoed from the corridors outside. After centuries of dormancy, the station's security systems were waking up. Marcus grabbed his salvage gear as the station's security systems came alive around them. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows through the laboratory while mechanical sounds grew louder in the corridors beyond. "Shh, this way," he said, heading toward the exit, but Vera caught his arm with surprising strength. "Not that direction," she warned. "Security drones will funnel us toward the main corridors. There's another way." She moved to what appeared to be a solid wall and pressed her palm against a hidden panel. The wall slid aside, revealing a narrow service tunnel Marcus's scanners had missed. "How did you know about this?" he asked, as they squeezed into the passage. "I designed parts of this station," Vera replied, moving with confident grace through the cramped space. "Before I became its prisoner." They crawled through the tunnel as the sounds of pursuit grew distant. The passage was barely wide enough for Marcus's shoulders. But Vera moved ahead of him like she traveled this route countless times before. "You said you created something," Marcus said as they paused at a junction. "What kind of something gets you locked up for centuries?" Vera was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of old pain. "I discovered how to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. Not just matter and energy, but the laws that govern existence." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's cold air. "That's impossible, is it?" Vera touched the symbols glowing on his chest through his torn suit. "You're marked with quantum bindings that shouldn't exist according to conventional science. Your life force is now entangled with mine across dimensional barriers. How impossible does that seem now?" Before Marcus could answer, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber he'd never seen on the station schematics. Ancient machinery lined the walls, covered in the same shifting symbols that marked his skin. At the center stood a massive, crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. "What is this place?" Marcus whispered. "The heart of my research," Vera said, approaching the crystal. "This is where I first touched the fabric of reality and learned to reshape it." As she neared the crystal, the symbols on Marcus's chest began to resonate, creating a harmony that seemed to make the air itself sing. The sensation was both beautiful and terrifying. "The bond between us," Vera explained, "it's not just mystical. It's quantum mechanical. Your consciousness is now partially entangled with mine. We share more than just linked lifespans." Marcus could feel it as she spoke, a subtle awareness at the edge of his thoughts that wasn't quite his own. Emotions and memories that belonged to someone else, flickering through his mind like distant stars. "I didn't ask for this," he said, though his anger felt hollow. The truth was, the connection didn't feel entirely unwelcome. "Neither did I," Vera replied softly. but sometimes the universe makes choices for us. She turned to face him, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten. Not just gratitude or apology, but a deep loneliness that spoke of centuries spent in isolation. "Tell me what happened," he said. "How did you end up in that prison?" Vera's hand traced the crystal's surface, and images began to form in its depths. Marcus saw flashes of memory. A younger Vera working alongside brilliant scientists. The excitement of discovery, then fear and betrayal as governments realized the implications of her work. "I created a device that could rewrite physical laws in localized areas," she said. "Imagine making gravity flow upward, or time move backward, or making solid matter exist in multiple places simultaneously. The applications were limitless. And dangerous," Marcus added. "Infinitely so. In the wrong hands, my research could unmake reality itself. So when the Galactic Council demanded I turn over my work for military applications, I refused." The crystal showed him the aftermath. Vera's laboratory destroyed, her colleagues arrested or killed, herself hunted across the galaxy until finally captured and brought here. "They couldn't kill me," she continued, "because I'd integrated the technology into my own neural pathways. The knowledge died with me. So instead, they locked me away until I agreed to cooperate or died of old age." But the stasis prevented aging, Marcus realized. Exactly. A perfect prison. Conscious enough to suffer, but unable to die or escape, Vera's voice hardened. "Until you came along and changed everything." The chamber suddenly shook as something massive impacted the station's hull. Through the crystal, Marcus could see external views showing ships approaching. Military vessels with familiar markings. "The hegemony," Vera said, her face grim. "They've been monitoring this station for centuries, waiting for signs of activity. They're coming for you?" "They're coming for us," she corrected. "The bond marks. You as connected to me. They'll consider you contaminated, dangerous by association." More impacts shook the station as boarding pods attached to the hull. Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of cutting torches as the military forces breached the outer layers. "We need to get to my ship," Marcus said, checking his gear. The Wanderer's Edge was fast, built for quick escapes from hostile situations. "It's too late for that," Vera said, studying the crystal's images. "They've surrounded the station, but there might be another way." She pressed her hands against the crystal, and the symbols on both their bodies flared with brilliant light. Felt power flowing through the bond between them, reality itself becoming malleable under Vera's will. "What are you doing?" he asked, feeling the chamber around them begin to shift and change. "Something I swore I'd never do again," Vera replied, strain evident in her voice. "I'm going to tear a hole in space itself." The air around them began to ripple and distort as Vera's power built. Marcus could feel the bond between them stretching, his own life force being drawn into her working. It should have terrified him, but instead he felt oddly complete, as if this was what he'd been, meant for all along. "Hold on to me," Vera commanded, her form beginning to blur as reality bent around her. "And whatever happens, don't let go." Marcus grabbed her hand as the chamber exploded into impossible geometries and swirling colors. The last thing he heard, before the universe folded around them, was the sound of hegemony soldiers breaching the outer laboratory, arriving moments too late to stop their escape. Marcus's consciousness returned gradually, like surfacing from deep water. He found himself lying on crystalline sand beneath an alien sky painted in shades of amber and gold. 2 moons hung overhead, their surfaces covered in the same shifting patterns that marked his chest. "Where are we?" he asked, sitting up and immediately regretting the movement as pain shot through his skull. Vera knelt nearby, her face pale with exhaustion. The dimensional jump had clearly cost her tremendously. "Sanctuary," she said simply. "A pocket reality I created years ago as an emergency refuge." Marcus looked around, taking in the impossible landscape. Crystal formations rose like trees from the metallic sand, their surfaces reflecting light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In the distance, structures that might have been buildings or might have been natural formations dotted the horizon. "You created this entire world?" he asked, awe coloring his voice. A small one, Vera admitted, barely the size of a large island. But it exists outside normal space-time, making it nearly impossible to find or reach. As his strength returned, Marcus noticed something else. The bond between them felt stronger here, more pronounced. He could sense Vera's thoughts and emotions more clearly, and he suspected she could sense his as well. The connection is amplified here, Vera confirmed, apparently reading his thoughts. This place was built using the same principles that created our bond. We're more attuned to each other in this reality. Marcus stood, testing his balance on the shifting, crystalline ground. How long can we stay here? As long as necessary, Vera said, but something in her expression suggested it wasn't that simple. Though prolonged isolation in a pocket dimension has its own risks. She gestured toward the distant structures, and they began walking across the surreal landscape. As they moved, Marcus became increasingly aware of Vera's memories bleeding through their connection. Images of her past life flickered through his consciousness, laboratories filled with impossible experiments, colleagues who became enemies, and always the crushing weight of knowledge too dangerous to share. I can feel what you've been through, he said softly. The loneliness, the betrayal. Did you survive it? Some days I wasn't sure I wanted to, Vera replied honestly. The centuries in stasis were a mercy compared to the years before my capture, when I was hunted by everyone I'd once called friend. They reached the nearest structure, which proved to be a dwelling of sorts. Its walls formed from the same crystal as everything else in this pocket reality. Inside, furnishings materialized at Vera's thought, creating a comfortable living space that seemed to anticipate their needs. Tell me about the research, Marcus said as they settled into chairs that adjusted themselves to their bodies. Did you discover reality manipulation in the first place? Vera was quiet for a moment, then began to speak. As she did, the crystal walls around them began displaying images, showing her memories in vivid detail. I was studying quantum consciousness, she began, trying to understand how awareness emerges from physical processes. During one experiment, I achieved a state of perfect quantum coherence in my own neural patterns. The walls showed a younger Vera connected to a massive array of quantum processors. Her brainwaves synchronized with the machines in ways that shouldn't have been possible. In that state, I could perceive reality's underlying structure, she continued. I saw how consciousness and physical laws were connected at the deepest level. Thought literally shapes reality, but usually the effect is too small to notice. You found a way to amplify it, Marcus guessed. Exactly. By creating quantum resonance between multiple consciousness, could generate enough coherent intent to alter local physical laws. Vera's expression darkened. The first time I made gravity reverse itself, I knew I'd opened a door that could never be closed. Marcus felt a regret and fear through their bond. He tried to limit the research, tried to destroy it, Vera said firmly. But by then, too many people knew what I'd discovered. The military applications were obvious. Imagine soldiers who could walk through walls, or ships that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. The images on the walls shifted, showing the aftermath of Vera's refusal to cooperate. Military forces attacking her laboratory, friends and colleagues turned against her by fear or greed. Her desperate flight across the galaxy as reality itself became her weapon and her curse. I fought back, she admitted, her voice heavy with old shame. I used my abilities to defend myself, reshaping reality around my pursuers. Some of them never returned to normal space-time. Marcus could feel the weight of those deaths through their bond, the guilt that had haunted her for centuries. But he could also sense something else, her determination to never again use her power for destruction. And now, he asked, the hegemony will never stop hunting us. They'll tear the galaxy apart looking for you. Yes, Vera agreed. But things are different now. I'm no longer alone. She looked at him directly, and Marcus felt the full depth of their connection. It wasn't just that their lives were linked. Their consciousnesses were beginning to merge in subtle ways. Her knowledge was becoming his, and his memories were becoming hers. The bond gives you access to my abilities, Vera said. It's not the full extent, but enough to help me control them. Together, we might be able to do something I could never accomplish alone. What's that? Find a way to use this power constructively instead of destructively, to protect instead of destroy. Vera stood, moving to a wall that showed the space beyond their pocket reality. There are forces in the galaxy far more dangerous than the hegemony. Ancient entities that exist between dimensions, feeding on reality itself. Marcus joined her at the wall, seeing glimpses of things that defied description. Creatures of pure entropy that consumed entire star systems. Beings of crystallized time that could erase civilizations from history itself. They're the real threat, Vera said. The hegemony thinks my research is dangerous because of what human governments might do with it. They don't realize what's already out there, waiting for our reality to weaken enough for them to break through. You think we can stop them? I think we have to try. Vera turned to face him fully. But it means accepting what we've become. We can never return to our old lives, Marcus. The bond between us makes us something new, something that exists partially outside normal reality. Marcus felt the truth of her words resonating through their connection. He was no longer just a salvager, looking for profit. He was becoming something else, something more. The thought should have terrified him, but instead he felt a strange sense of rightness, as if this was what he'd been meant to become all along. Then we learn to control this power, he said firmly. We use it to protect the galaxy from threats they can't even imagine. Vera smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness he'd seen from her. Together? Together? Marcus confirmed, taking her hand. As their skin touched, the symbols on both their bodies flared with brilliant light, and Marcus felt their bond deepen even further. Whatever they were becoming, they would face it as partners. The pocket reality shimmered around them, as Marcus learned to channel the strange new energies flowing through their bond. Vera guided him through exercises that stretched his consciousness beyond its normal limits, teaching him to perceive the quantum structure underlying all existence. Feel the connections, Vera instructed as they stood together in the crystal garden. Every atom, every photon, every thought, they're all linked in an infinite web. Marcus closed his eyes and extended his awareness through their bond. Gradually, he began to sense what Vera described, a vast network of quantum entanglements that connected everything in existence. But he also sensed something else. Dark spots in the web, where the connections had been severed or corrupted. Something's wrong, he said, opening his eyes. There are holes in the pattern. Vera's expression grew serious. The entities I told you about? They're already here, feeding on the quantum substrate of reality. Each breach they create weakens the barrier between dimensions. She gestured, and the crystal walls around them displayed a map of the galaxy. Dark spots marked locations where the quantum web showed damage, and Marcus was alarmed to see how many there were. It's worse than I thought, Vera admitted. While I was imprisoned, they'd been systematically weakening our reality's foundations. Another few decades, and the barriers will collapse entirely. Marcus studied the map, his enhanced awareness picking up details he wouldn't have noticed before. The pattern isn't random, he realized. They're targeting specific nodes in the quantum network. Exactly. They're following a plan, trying to create a cascade failure that will tear open permanent rifts between dimensions. Vera's voice was grim. Once that happens, our reality will be consumed from within. Before Marcus could respond, alerts began flashing around the chamber. The walls showed external views of their pocket dimension, revealing something that made his blood run cold. Ships were materializing outside their sanctuary, not through normal space travel, but by tearing holes directly through dimensional barriers. The hegemony found us, Marcus said, but Vera shook her head. Look closer, she urged. Those aren't human ships. Marcus focused his enhanced perception on the approaching vessels and immediately recoiled. The ships existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their forms shifting between states that hurt to look at directly. As grown, their whole surfaces rippling with organic patterns that suggested alien intelligence. The Vorthok, Vera whispered, her face pale. I'd hoped they hadn't noticed our escape. What are they? Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer through their bond. The entities I told you about, they're not just feeding on reality, they're actively hunting anyone who can manipulate quantum structures. They see us as either potential allies or existential threats. The alien ships began projecting energy beams toward their pocket dimension. But instead of weapons, the beams seemed designed to destabilize the quantum fields maintaining their sanctuary. "They're trying to collapse our refuge," Vera said, her hands moving in complex patterns as she fought to maintain their reality's integrity. "But forcing us out into normal space where they can capture us?" Marcus felt the strain she was under. Through their bond, the enormous effort required to hold their pocket dimensions stable against the alien assault. Without conscious thought, he reached out through their connection and began adding his own strength to hers. "What are you doing?" Vera gasped as his power joined with hers. "What I should have done from the beginning," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the forces raging around them. "I'm choosing to stand with you. Together, their combined will prove stronger than Vera's power alone." The pocket dimension stabilized, and the alien ships pulled back, apparently reassessing their approach. "They can't break through our defenses as long as we work together," Vera realized. "But they'll wait us out. Can't maintain this level of effort indefinitely." Marcus studied the tactical situation through their enhanced senses. The Vorthok ships had formed a perimeter around their pocket dimension, clearly prepared for a long siege. But he could also sense something else. The aliens' confidence was based on assumptions that might not be correct. "They think we're trapped," he said slowly. "But what if we're not trying to hide from them?" "What do you mean?" He created this. "Pocket reality using the same principles as reality manipulation itself," Marcus explained, his thoughts racing. "What if instead of using it as a shelter, we use it as a weapon?" Vera's eyes widened as she understood his meaning. "Collapse the dimensional barriers deliberately, but in a controlled way. Turn our sanctuary into a quantum bomb that disrupts their ship's multidimensional existence. Can we do that without destroying ourselves in the process?" "I don't know," Vera admitted. "The energies involved would be enormous, and we'd need perfect synchronization between our consciousness. One mistake and we'd be torn apart along with them." Marcus felt her fear through their bond, but also her determination. These entities threatened not just them, but all of reality itself. Someone had to take a stand against them. "Then we'd better not make any mistakes," he said, taking her hands in his. Vera looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Together, then." "But Marcus, if this goes wrong, it won't," he interrupted. "I can feel it through our connection. This is what we were meant to do. Why the universe brought us together." They moved to the center of their crystalline sanctuary, where the quantum fields were strongest. Hand in hand, they began the delicate process of reversing the pocket dimension's creation. Not to destroy it, but to transform it into something unprecedented. Marcus felt their consciousness merged more completely than ever before as they worked. Vera's knowledge became his knowledge, her memories his memories. In return, she gained access to his intuition, his natural feel for the quantum patterns that she had learned through years of study. The pocket dimension began to collapse around them, but in a controlled implosion that concentrated its quantum energy into a single point between their joined hands. The alien ships, sensing the change, began moving closer to interfere.
"Oh,"
Vera whispered, and together they released the compressed pocket reality in a directed burst that tore through the Vorthoks, separating them from the Vorthok fleet. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The alien ships, existing as they did in multiple dimensions simultaneously, were caught in the quantum shockwave and torn apart as the dimensions they occupied suddenly ceased to exist in that region of space. Marcus and Vera found themselves floating in normal space, surrounded by the wreckage of the alien fleet. But they weren't floating in vacuum. Somehow their merged consciousness had created a bubble of breathable atmosphere around them. "We did it," Marcus said, hardly believing they'd survived. "We did more than that," Vera replied, her voice filled with wonder. "Look at what we've become." Marcus looked down at himself and gasped. His body was no longer entirely solid, but existed in a state somewhere between matter and energy. Had undergone a similar transformation, her form shifting between physical existence and pure consciousness. "We're no longer bound by normal physical laws," Vera explained. "The process of collapsing the pocket dimension has transformed us into beings that can exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. What does that mean for us?" "It means We can fulfill our purpose, Vera said, gesturing toward the quantum web that they could now perceive directly around them. We can travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly, repair the damage the entities have done to reality's foundation, and stand guard against future threats. Marcus felt the rightness of it through their bond. This was indeed what they were meant. To become guardians of reality itself, protectors of the quantum web that held existence together. The hegemony will still hunt us, he pointed out. Let them try, Vera replied with a smile. We exist partially outside their reality now, but our real work lies elsewhere. She gestured toward the distant stars, where Marcus could now sense other weak points in the quantum web, other places where reality-feeding entities had left their mark. Ready to save the galaxy? She asked. Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling their bond stronger than ever. With you, always? 3 months had passed since their transformation, and Marcus was still learning to navigate existence as a multidimensional being. He and Vera had become something unprecedented in galactic history, guardians who could perceive and repair the fundamental structure of reality itself. Their first major intervention had been at the Kepler mining colony, where reality-feeding entities had created a zone where physics worked backward. Water flowed uphill, gravity pushed instead of pulled, and people aged in reverse until they ceased to exist. Working together, Marcus and Vera had rewoven the quantum fabric, restoring normal causality and saving thousands of lives. The damage is getting worse, Vera observed as they materialized above the frozen world of Heltris's prime. Below them, an entire continent existed in temporal flux, its surface cycling through different time rates that made rescue impossible. Marcus extended his enhanced senses through their bond, studying the quantum distortions. Multiple breach points, he reported. The entities didn't just feed here, established a permanent foothold. Like their early interventions, this would require more than simple repairs. They would need to sever the connection between dimensions entirely, cutting off the entity's access to this region of space. Are you ready? Vera asked, her form shifting between solid matter and pure energy as she prepared to work. Marcus nodded, feeling their consciousness merge as they descended toward the planet's surface. Their combined awareness could now perceive 11 different dimensions simultaneously. Seeing the intricate web of quantum connections that held reality together, the work was delicate and dangerous. Each severed connection risked destabilizing nearby regions, potentially creating new problems even as they solved existing ones. But months of practice had taught them to work in perfect harmony. Their merged consciousness capable of calculations that would challenge the galaxy's most advanced computers. As they worked, Marcus became aware of something else. Observers. Not the reality-feeding entities they'd grown accustomed to fighting, but something more familiar yet equally threatening. Hegemony ships, he warned Vera through their mental link. A full battle fleet, approaching from the outer system. Them come, Vera replied, not breaking her concentration on the quantum repairs. We have work to finish. The fleet arrived as they completed the dimensional severing, cutting off the entity's access to Heltris Prime forever. The planet's surface returned to normal temporal flow, and the colonists who had been trapped in temporal distortions were finally free to evacuate. Admiral Corrin of the Hegemony flagship addressed them through quantum communications, his message reaching them directly, despite their existence partially outside normal spacetime. Vera Ashton and Marcus Vale. His voice resonated through their shared consciousness. By order of the Galactic Council, you are commanded to surrender yourselves for containment and study. Marcus felt Vera's amusement through their bond. After everything they'd accomplished, the Hegemony still saw them as threats to be contained, rather than protectors to be celebrated. Admiral Vera responded, her voice carrying across multiple dimensional frequencies. We are no longer subject to your authority. We exist to protect reality itself from forces you cannot comprehend. You are dangerous anomalies, Corrin replied. Your very existence destabilizes the natural order. Surrender now, and you will be treated humanely. Marcus studied the fleet through his enhanced senses and saw the weapons they carried. Not conventional arms, but devices designed to disrupt quantum coherence. They could potentially damage or even destroy Marcus and Vera's transformed existence. "They're serious about this," he observed, "and we show them why that's a mistake." Vera replied. Together, they reached out through the quantum web, not to attack the fleet, but to demonstrate the scope of their awareness. In an instant, they connected the Admiral's consciousness to their own perception, showing him the reality-feeding entities, the damaged regions of space-time, and the critical work required to prevent universal collapse. Admiral Corrin's response came after several minutes of stunned silence. This is real? These entities? This damage to reality? More real than your fear of what we've become, Vera replied gently. We could have used our power for conquest or personal gain. Instead, we chose to become guardians of the galaxy you're trying to protect. The fleet held its position while Corrin consulted with his superiors. Marcus used the time to study the quantum web more closely, searching for other regions that required their intervention. There, he said, highlighting a sector near the galactic core. Something massive is happening there. The quantum distortions are unlike anything we've seen. Vera's attention joined his, and together they perceived something that made their combined consciousness recoil in shock. Not just reality-feeding entities, but something far worse. A convergence point where multiple dimensional barriers were breaking down simultaneously. If that cascade completes, Vera whispered, it won't just affect our galaxy. The damage will spread to neighboring realities, potentially destroying billions of inhabited worlds across multiple dimensions. Admiral Corrin's voice interrupted. Their analysis. The Council has reached a decision. We cannot officially sanction your activities, but we will not interfere with your mission. Consider yourselves autonomous agents for galactic security. A wise choice, Marcus replied. We'll need access to hegemony sensor networks and scientific databases to track entity activity more effectively. Granted, Corrin said, though. His tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement. But understand this. If you ever turn your power against innocent populations, then you'll do your duty and try to stop us, Vera finished. We understand, Admiral. We're human once ourselves. The fleet departed, leaving Marcus and Vera alone above the restored world of Heltris Prime. Below them, evacuation ships were already arriving to help the colonists relocate to safer systems. One crisis resolved, Marcus observed. More to go? As many as necessary, Vera replied, her form already beginning to shift toward their next destination. This is what we chose, Marcus. What we became when you decided to free me from that prison. Marcus felt the weight of their responsibility through their bond, but also the deep satisfaction that came from using their power to protect rather than destroy any regrets. Only one, Vera said, her consciousness touching his with infinite tenderness. That it took us so long to find each other. They dissolved into quantum energy, racing across the galaxy toward the growing crisis at the galactic core. Behind them, the restored world of Heltris Prime spun peacefully in space, its people safe under the protection of guardians who had chosen love over fear, sacrifice over safety. In the depths of space, reality itself seemed to sigh with relief, knowing that somewhere in the vast darkness, two consciousness moved as one, dedicated to preserving the delicate balance that allowed existence itself to continue. The bond that had begun as a prison had become something far greater, a partnership that transcended individual identity, a love that spanned dimensions, and a commitment that would endure as long as reality itself needed protecting. They were no longer just human. They were no longer separate beings. They had become something new, something necessary, something eternal. They had become guardians.